Welcome to our presentation titled Think You Can Just Test That API? Think Again, featuring Jonathan Wright and Hugh Price. I'm your host, Josiah. Before we begin, I'd like to explain how to participate in today's event. You'll be watching streaming video and content. To optimize your bandwidth, please be sure to close out any unnecessary applications that may be running in the background. You will notice a number of widgets at the bottom of your console. Here you may view the speaker bio and presentation abstract. Loving the presentation? Send a tweet to @TechWell and include the hashtag STARWest. Also, please send us your feedback about the presentation via our short 4-question survey. To submit a question, use the moderated chat function. We will answer any technical questions within the chat. And now, Jonathan and Hugh are taking the stage.
Okay.
Jonathan.
Oh, sorry. I thought we'd talk virtual conference for a second, but unfortunately, Sony don't release the new VR headset until next week, so I wasn't managed to, for the guys out there in virtual land, to do the first ever virtual presentation. So maybe next time, okay? Maybe next time. So let me just introduce you and thank everyone wherever you've dialed in from, whatever time zone you're at. Thanks for joining us. And I'm going to talk around 15, 20 minutes of some visionary stuff that I've been doing for the last few years. And then my lovely assistant, Hugh is going to talk you through and do a live demo, which is very brave. So we'll kick off. So I think we've already probably had an intro, so I'm not going to spend much time. I'm just going to go straight into it. So I've been talking around digital for the last few years at Gartner and a few other the IoT events, talking around this next generation stuff. And the entry level for this stuff is a lot easier now. We're talking about $100 for a VR headset and, AI with, Alexa, which has only just been launched in the UK last week. You guys over here have had it for 2 years. So this is fairly new, even though she doesn't seem to like me. Alexa, what's the meaning of life? Long pause, dramatic pause.
The answer is 42, but the question is more complicated.
That's why we're going to talk about it today. So, part of it is that, CA have grown up in mainframe land. And I'm just about to do a whole series of blogs around legacy being your legacy, i.e. that's the future. And people will be sat there thinking, what? But the whole point of digital is digitalizing your core. Now, if you've got legacy, wherever it is, you need to understand that data before you can actually digitalize your processes, pivot, be able to deal with disruption. So it's as relevant as all the other stuff that we've been talking about recently. When I started in the 90s, and the focus was really around these large-scale ecosystems like SAP and Oracle, e-business, part of that challenge was these were hugely complex systems. And now things have just got even bigger from a complexity point of view. And we're talking about new types of endpoints, new types of devices. Like I just mentioned, the whole Sony VR, which released next week, and they're expecting millions to be sold of these VR headsets. So that's mainstream adoption, worldwide adoption of VR. You just think about 2 million users on day one. That's a lot more than the Sony testers have had access to. That's 2,000 years in a day spent in a VR virtual environment. So these are new types of challenges. And, I understand Selenium 3 has just been launched, but it's not the Selenium hyperdrive from BB-8, which is going to have to test this stuff, because this is going to be machine learning, this is going to be video gaming analytics, this is going to be the next big challenge, data lakes, all the data blending and new challenges that you guys as testers are going to start facing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this stuff, because actually it's evolution over revolution. There's no one solution to this, and you guys have been thinking about it for maybe the last 3 decades. And part of this STARWest conference is bringing great ideas and people together. So today's talk is about API testing, and I just wanted to put up this slide because it's really interesting. Because when I thought about API and some of the big players, what you would expect, if you look at this, CA's been sat in this landscape for quite a while. This is the latest Gartner review. Over 50% of the market, we've been focusing on service virtualization and API testing for quite a long time. It's in our heritage. And then you've got the big players like Parasoft and IBM after. That's a real interesting slide for me, because it's kind of showing that we're really thinking about this Internet of Things, this enterprise of things landscape. And we're thinking about not dealing with endpoints that are just UIs. which is a kind of a very big shift from a software testing kind of profession. Alexa, is anyone going to be able to test these kind of large-scale...
Alexa, what is an API?
Oh, sorry. What is an API?
In computer programming, an application programming interface is a set of subroutine definitions, protocols, and tools for building software and applications.
Alexa, tell Hive to turn on to 21 degrees.
I would love to. Your heating is now set to 21 degrees.
Now, the funny thing is I did this remotely from over here, and I recorded it because I thought it would probably not work live on stage. But that's an IoT endpoint. That's controlling my heating remotely. And that's using an AI-based natural language learning platform. I would expect every single organization here today to be thinking about how do I integrate with platforms like Alexa to sell my services. Not through a UI, not through another mobile app. You know, that's time changing. The new, opportunities in the market are in these kind of AI platforms. And this is nothing new. This is stuff that's been around for you for 2 years. For us, it got launched last week. And this was the first thing I got when I tried to do it. It was an API fail. And I was thinking, come on, guys. Amazon have got to get this stuff right, especially in the UK. So this is why we're talking about API testing. But, partly what Alexa was just saying is that API is a very simple thing. It's been around for a very long time. And it's just a basic request and response. So actually, I wanted to go through and talk about something a little bit more complex. And I did a live demo last week for TechWell on requirements engineering. And I talked about testing Pokemon using a model. Now, why I did this, apart from obviously the reason for Pokemon, and this is me on the beach the other day trying to catch one, but part of it was that this is a hugely complex model. And the live demo that we did, we took what is going to be a new function that's going to get released in a week's time. And we said, let's change the flow and see what happens and how many tests you've got to generate to try and, Julie's favorite word, exhaustively test this system. I know some rage quit going on there. But part of it is, these are hugely complex. Equally, at the end of the day, this is just a very sophisticated sensor. The fact that it's got AR, VR, or MR just adds another level of complexity. I've been working with Perfecto for the last 9 years, and we did a whole demonstration around doing a smart city application where we physically injected synthetic data of 2 billion historical transactions into a big database so that we could actually do people walking around the city of Copenhagen. That was a new type of challenge for me as a tester. But these are real things. I've met my step goal. Great. So, I talked about the whole SOA, kind of these big landscapes, Oracle, Salesforce, these big, complex systems that are very hard to test. And, they're just about to get much harder. This is a paper that was released earlier last month around pattern analysis and artificial intelligence from Google. And to me, this was like a big step. How do you test VR? How do you understand, does the VR say, well, actually, I'm recognizing that what I'm looking at is a little puppy, which I hope it is, and then automatically it says, I can see a dog sitting on the beach next to another dog. Now, this is next generation stuff that you're all going to have to start dealing with. And there's not going to be a Selenium browser interface to it. I don't want to break too many people's automation dreams. So part of, I've spent the last 15 years doing automation in the industry. And partly, it was only recently, after having some good chats over the last few days, that I realized that everything's just a node. Everything's just an endpoint. And, this new Viv, which got released last month, which is another natural language system very similar to Siri, it models out that in a very similar way to what I'm going to demonstrate to you today, so that you can understand how to test these individual nodes. Now, that node may be a UI point, if you're lucky. It most likely will be maybe an ESB. It could be some kind of REST API. It could be a microservice. Whatever it is, you've got to understand that landscape and visualize that. And that's one of the things I've not really seen. As much as I love given, when, then, it's not that easy to visualize, right? So starting to see this stuff and treating it as nodes and understanding the relationship, whether this is code maps, whether this is the API layer, or even if it's a UI, I have to break it to you guys, but UI is just another API. You're just driving a third party to touch a node, and that node may be a DOM reference for an XPath using some fuzzy logic algorithm. It's very simple. So part of this new challenge, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the stuff that I've been doing, is things like IoT and microservices is a whole new challenge for all of us. And I want to talk about this in kind of what I've been doing for the last couple of years. And that's mainly smart city projects. So I talked about Copenhagen. And in that case, we used crowd testing to get the students at Copenhagen University to go around and capture sensor information, so GPX data, so that this gentleman over here could generate synthetic data and transactions of historical routes, catching buses, trying to find the most, gamification, all this great new tech. And, I've done this for His Highness in Dubai. I've done this for Springfield, which is a smart city that's being built out in Brisbane in Australia. I've done this for virtual power stations, where I generated 10,000 virtual endpoints for a unique pattern of predictive weather algorithms to say how much of these individual solar and weather will generate into a virtual power and do demand and response for an air conditioning unit. These are real things. Equally, we've done the same thing from a nuclear power point of view. And someone said the other day, testing these critical infrastructures is a challenge. And this is why we're talking so much about how important the model is. Because these are hugely complex landscapes. And these are whole new challenges, especially for testers. So, I kind of tried to go and follow on the whole great example of world peace. And I kind of thought, the last couple of days, I've been chatting to some really interesting people around just nodes. And, this is a great diagram. You've probably already seen it before. This is the internet, which is great, because I've never been able to model the internet. Fair enough, this is 1969, so it's a little bit out of date, but don't worry too much. But each one of those nodes connect to other nodes through links. Those links could be APL calls, they could be messages, they could be anything. This is suddenly a new challenge for all of us, is that, how do you test or those different interfaces, which could be an SAP component, it could be an AWS or App Fabric call, it could be anything. You don't know what those endpoints are, but what they are is a visual link of a system that you're interacting with. And I kind of gave away the bit of the drum roll that actually that UI layer is also just a node. Now, what I love about the latest version of Visual Studio is that as you write the code, it generates the DOM. You don't even have to build it. So therefore, you can start testing this stuff before you've even thought about it. You can start understanding the relationship of nodes and how this text block relates to some kind of message, data, database. It's suddenly a whole new way of looking at things. And, I understand the whole API, UI, pyramid that, Lisa Crispin talked about. And 4 years ago, I was talking about this stuff at STARWest. And, to me, this understanding of relationships of nodes is going to be the only way that we can understand complex systems and not invest in a single layer, but across the entire layer. MVC, Model View Controller, it's nothing new. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about AngularJS or some kind of Java landscape. We know underneath that there's a SQL call, there's a database. It could be written in some kind of language, C#, Python. I don't care. I honestly don't care about what language it is anymore because it's irrelevant. There's an abstraction layer, which is this on the left, that takes all that complexity away from me. And, I don't want to break it to these guys, but they're just drivers to interface with these technologies, and they're interchangeable. And that's the great thing. But what's not interchangeable is the model, because you'll build those models, and part of that model is how you test across the entire landscape. I've been doing a lot with DevOps, and I did a paper for Computer Weekly with Domino's, and we talked about how we reused these testing artifacts or lean engineering principles of using SV, NV, NFV at every single stage where you see one of these nice little purple boxes. So whether that is some kind of TDD, BDD, ATDD, which is everyone's talking about, or whether that's a process map imported from Nimbus around how you test Oracle Flow Builder. It doesn't matter. Part of it is you're building a model, you're building some code, and then you're moving over to doing integration, penetration, security, performance engineering, that actually you're reusing all these artifacts. It's a continuous feedback loop. And what it is on this automated pipeline is it's automation. It's not test automation. It's automation. Equally, we're just testing nodes, whether that be through staging, pipeline as code, configuration as code. It doesn't matter. You know, part of it is understanding these landscapes and how you release. So, you know, part of what I've been talking about recently is around design ops, which was the idea that dev's too late in the cycle. And I know people have talked about test ops, no ops, some of the ones that I'm not allowed to say with other letter ops. You know, part of it is that you've got to get shift left. You've got to get over here to the design and the idea conception. Now, I've been doing some of the lean startup stuff. I've been doing some of the lean UX stuff. I understand that you've got to build and prove an idea through a hypothesis before you even write any code. This stuff down the line is just validating your original concept of a system. And you know, this is what we're doing. We're shifting left, but we're also shifting right. I heard the keynote earlier about the fact that you're taking logs from Splunk or APM or wherever of real customer usage, and you're validating your original model to say, yeah, you're right. 30% of our users are going through this, and 4% of them are doing this weird thing which we need to go and investigate. But you've got to learn, continuous learning, and that's why I use the word connected intelligence, which is this, how we learn from these systems. They're not silos anymore. They're not dev, test, ops. They're just part of a delivery of value across the entire stream. This is value-driven delivery, a completely different thing. And you know, part of one of these other areas that I've been talking about is this whole data ecology, is mapping out these complex landscapes of smart cities and smart power stations and energy platforms and predictive, prescriptive technologies that are going to be the next generation. And that's why legacy is so important, because you're going to have to do the data archaeology so you can understand how you blend that data and you do things like machine learning on it. Because if you're not using that data, you may as well not have it. Equally, if you've got things like GDPR, which are going to hit companies massively. I know TalkTalk's just had a fine in the UK of 40 million. If it was under GDPR, that would have been 4 billion. So suddenly, you know, you're starting to see these fines that would be huge if you don't understand where your data is, how long it's there, what areas you've got it. Even if you're using it for blending, insight, you know, data science purposes, you've got to know and understand your data better, which is kind of what the whole talk I'm going to be talking about today, and API testing and understanding and modeling these complex systems. Thankfully, there's no one tool to rule them all, and these are interchangeable. But what is important is you've got tools that integrate into every part of the stack. This isn't a test activity. It's not a test tool. This is something which helps you facilitate idea generation, to proving it, to learning from ops, to managing APIs, to virtualization from day one, first day automation, first day testing. You know, these are whole simple concepts that everyone should be able to utilize. And, you know, thankfully, that's my visionary stuff kind of gone. And I'm not going to talk about quantum teleportation because we don't have time and we don't have a dog that could potentially talk about it. But, you know, the whole part is challenging what we're doing. It's not going one direction or another. It's connecting everything together. So today's talk's really going to be about the whole continuous testing, which is just one single component. But what we're trying to do, which is very simple, this think, make, check kind of life cycle, is that we're talking about checking or testing, whatever you want to call it. You know, part of it is extremely important, but you're measuring and learning from that. It's not just a one-way street. It's continuously spinning round. Equally, you guys might be looking at this and going, it's okay, I'm not doing AI. Don't worry about it. But you might be on this journey of maturity from an automation perspective. But at some point, modeling, using service virtualization, wanting to achieve continuous testing, not by spinning up 15 VMs and running things in parallel, but actually doing something which is smarter. You know, these are new challenges, and you need new tools and technologies and approaches to do that. So I've just picked up this really simple release pipeline, which is kind of represents the continuous testing realm. And, you know, at each one of these stages, you've got the auto-generation of virtual services and endpoints, and this will change at every single part of the pipe. In test, you may virtualize some of these components. You may be using NoSQL, then you might move to MongoDB. You know, you might be changing and exchanging these components interchangeably. Equally, what's happening in the provisioning world may be very different to the dev and test world. So this is a whole new challenge. And part of it is it's continuously at every point, these APIs and these things you're interacting from, you're learning from and passing the information back. So, you know, I guess everybody in this room is probably already getting information about every single one of these, you know, whether it's mean time to recovery, whether it's, you know, the amount of defects catched at certain components. You have to be picking this information and learning from it over 6 months, 12-month cycles. So you can start predicting that if this tester at this time checks in this kind of piece of code, it's probably going to be a bad idea if it's 11 o'clock on a Friday night. But this is where connected intelligence is so important. You need to be learning and understanding this data. It can't be something that's generated in Excel and a nice, pretty dashboard. It's going to be bot to bot. It's going to be AI. It's going to be learning for itself. It's going to be always on testing that understands, evolves, and adapts continuously, not with human interaction to it, not driving some kind of manual script. You know, this is a whole new change. So I'm going to pass over to Hugh to kind of push some of these through, or we're going to bounce it backwards and forwards, because I actually think this is a really interesting area. Do you want to do a bit of intro?
I mean, when it comes to API testing,